Hello?
Hi, is this Robby?
Yep, this is Robby.
So I'm calling to learn more about the Jollyville Plateau Salamander. Where is the Jollyville Plateau Salamander found? Jollyville sounds like a really fun place to be.
Yeah. So the Jollyville Plateau area is in northern Travis County and southern Williamson County. And that's the only place that you can find the Jollyville Plateau Salamander. It's only in that tiny little area on the border of those two counties here in central Texas. And so it's an endemic species. Endemic means it's found in a very specific place and occurs nowhere else. And its habitat is it's an aquatic species of salamander, so they're living in the water. And you can see them in springs, so places where the water from the aquifer is coming out as surface water. And so that's where people generally see them, but they're also living underground in the aquifer as well.
Oh, wow. So they climb into the springs and down into the aquifer.
Right, yeah. And they're eating small invertebrates, things like little crustaceans, and this can be found pretty deep in the aquifer, even in the absence of any light or anything, but there is more food to be found closer to the surface.
Wow, so rad. So can you describe the species' appearance? Specifically, are there any distinctive colorations or specialty markings or something about the shape or form that a scientist or a naturalist or an artist might pay attention to?
Sure, yeah. So the salamanders are small. They're maybe 3 inches long max. They are fully aquatic, and so they retain their gills even when they're adults. So most salamanders that live in the water, they usually have gills in a larval stage, and then they transform into an adult salamander that doesn't have gills. But because these are fully aquatic for their entire life, they retain those gills.
Wow.
And so that's certainly one thing to look for with those. They're kind of a tan yellow color with these dark spots all over their body, and it's kind of an intricate pattern, especially around their face and their eyes. And I know that some people that are studying these, they found that pattern on the face of the dark spots is individually specific, and so each individual salamander has a recognizable pattern of spots, and you can use computer software to analyze images of these salamanders to as a way of tracking individuals over time and that kind of thing. What else? The gills. They have these feathery gills on the sides of their neck. And they're kind of a reddish color, so it's kind of a nice contrast with the yellow body with kind of grayish dark spots, and then the reddish feathery gills. There's a really beautiful mosaic of a related species, the Barton spring salamander, at the Zilker Science and Nature Center on the side of one of their buildings. And it actually uses mirrors really effectively to mimic those kinds of gray spots on the body of the salamander.
Oh, that's awesome. I want to definitely check that out. My next question was going to be, what is something wonderful or fascinating about this species? You've already shared some really amazing things about their coloration. Is there any other specific
natural history perspective? There's not a lot of vertebrate animals that live in the water underground. Texas is blessed with many species of these spring salamanders. The Jollyville Plateau Salamander is just one of a group of something like 20 species now, I think, of salamanders that have been described living in the aquifers and springs here. And I guess a cool thing about the group, so they're in the genus Eurycea, and most Eurycea species are found in eastern North America, here in central Texas, back when the climate was was cooler and there was forest cover and more water availability throughout Central Texas, there probably was only a single species, maybe two species of Eurycea. But as the climate began to dry, the salamanders were limited only to where water remained throughout the year because, again, part of their life cycle is aquatic, and so they required, they have a requirement of water. So it kind of caused a bunch of species to form. As the climate got drier, you get conditions that are available for these salamanders narrowing and into these specific places like the springs throughout Central Texas. And then over time, as you got fragmented populations of these Eurycea, they accumulate differences, genetic differences, morphological differences that will eventually lead to them becoming different species.
Wow. So why is this species threatened? Why is it on the threatened list?
So the main thing I would say is the very small range. Having such a small range means that if there's some sort of threat that causes the habitat available for the species to degrade or disappear, then you lose the species forever. It's gone from the earth. And so that's the main thing. And it does live in an area that is threatened by urban development. Certainly Austin and the surrounding suburbs like Pflugerville are surrounding habitat of this species of salamander, and there's pressure all the time in the watersheds that recharge the springs where the salamander lives. Another thing with these salamanders is they actually can act as an umbrella species for other taxa that live in the same habitats. I mentioned that there are some other things that live in the aquifers, some invertebrates, and there's some blind catfish that live in the aquifers. And these salamanders, they actually have a little bit of public support, especially the Barton Spring salamander has gotten a lot of attention over the years. And efforts that are made to protect the habitat of these spring-dwelling species also protect other species that live in the same areas. Species that we know less about, for example, a lot of the invertebrates, they may be even more rare and restricted than the salamanders are, but they're just more poorly known as well. And finally, protection of the salamanders is often good for human society directly as well. By protecting the recharge zone, protecting those watersheds, we also get cleaner water for ourselves and more spring flow as well. And many people in Central Texas enjoy recreating in these streams, going swimming, going fishing, and protection of the species has direct benefits for humans as well.
So then, in your opinion, how can the average person help this species? Are there any action steps?
Sure. So certainly if you are hiking around in natural areas that are watersheds that recharge these aquifers, try to step lightly, try to keep the area both clean of things like pet waste, and also avoid trampling the vegetation anything that causes the ground to get more compacted, like making a bunch of social trails, for example, will cause the water to flow over land rather than infiltrating into the soil and recharging the aquifer. I guess the main thing is to support any sort of efforts aimed at protecting the watersheds where the salamander lives and where these springs occur.
Robby, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge. That was incredible. I really appreciate it.
Sure, my pleasure.